I'm going to share my pronouns because you have your pronouns.
Yes.
And so for me, it says animal, mammal, homo sapiens, whereas for you, it says he, him.
Amazing. I think this is.
I think it's a good contrast. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think this is like the best time to kind of get started. So first of all, everyone who is listening to us and or watching, here I am your boy Atal, and I'm here with one of my favorite friend Brian. It's funny that Brian and I have never met in person, but there is just so much of synergy in our energy that we are just like, okay, we just build on the top of each other so well that I'm like, Brian, there is no one better than you with whom I can start this new thing in my life, which is a podcast. So to all the viewers and watchers, I'm very grateful to have you all as a part of this journey that I'm taking on today to share about our learnings with the world. We're going to name it as Science and Spirituality with Atal and Brian. The theme is science and spirituality. Brian is a amazing guy who can look at things from a science perspective. And here I am, my background from India, and I have seen how spirituality plays a very important part in my life. So I kind of like take that as a way to lead humans in the future, and that's how I'm coming from this side. So you will see both of those sides here. So I think without any delay here, we're gonna get started, and we will start with a round of introduction. So I am Atal, and I worked as a product manager in the healthcare industry for 5 years. I'm also an Ironman athlete, and I ran my Ironman race in 10 days, which I think is a big accomplishment. I think it has a lot to do with how I engineered my house, and we're gonna go into details about that. And other than that, I'm a graduate from IIT Kharagpur and UC Santa Barbara, and I look forward to taking healthy humanity to 22nd century through my work. And now I will hand it over to Brian to talk about himself.
Thank you, Atal. How about this? Before introducing who I am, I'd like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to be a part of your life. And I say that, as you mentioned, we've not yet met in person. We first met over the equivalent of FaceTime/Zoom on the Stanford campus. At least I was on the Stanford campus. I think you were in Arizona. And over the arc of maybe those 30 minutes or so, it was one of those vibrant, bright, bursting conversations where even though I was looking at you and engaged with you over the span of a 5-inch screen, it was one of the most engaging conversations, such that the rest of the world completely disappeared. And it was you and it was me engaged in a precious moment, passing through each next step of reality. Like that was that for me. And it was in that narrow time frame that I realized this is something special. This is something I need to nurture and cultivate and move forward with you as a team. So just if only to say thank you. This has been precious every step of the way so far, however early and incipient the stage we may be currently in. So
I have the same feelings, my friend. Same feelings here. And
it's nuts. Yeah. Like it's really like, I mean, of all the people I've met on this planet, to have met you via an introduction and to have things have played out as they've played out thus far, it really is a mind-blowing experience. So again, just thank you, and I appreciate it. Okay, so with that said, my name is Brian. I am a scientist by training. I have had one training my whole life, and it came on the heels of being inspired and having my life changed by a former professor, scientist, and mentor who inspired me to transform who I am intellectually, psychologically, more, and to begin to take life and science and learning and living and thriving, to take all those things seriously. And prior to shipping myself off to university, he committed suicide. And at that point, I said to myself, okay, what I need to do is to go out and at least try to get the best education on the planet so that I can bring it somewhere to enrich the lives and transform the lives of people, to change people importantly from within, in just the way my life was changed by a single individual many years ago. And so with that being my first and only dream as a 17-year-old, I went off to university, eventually trained at Cambridge, Berkeley, Stanford, Harvard, Penn, Howard Hughes Medical Institute. A few of those were positions that were moving in parallel together, aka I held them simultaneously. So it wasn't just a linear arc through chronology there. But the arc of what I studied, no less, the arc of what my heart and curiosity led me to was really this decade plus long love affair with the opportunity to work with some of the most precious and impressive people on the planet, studying the history and future of life and Earth. And we think, like, what's the history and future of life and Earth? What does that even mean? It's basically to take the life sciences, the earth sciences, and the threads that connect them and extend those threads from the past to the present to the future. So this includes subjects from paleontology and earth system science, aka the past, transitioning towards, say, the present with evolutionary biology as a nice tie-in that weaves all this stuff together across time, on through then even to the present and the future, global ecology, environmental science, and ultimately the future of humanity. And so I've been strongly influenced by people who are simultaneously specialists and generalists. They are both together in one. And that has been the influence in my life. That's what I've tried to follow. I love many things. I'm probably specialized in a few ways, but I've tried to not allow the focus of a specialty detract from my ability to see and integrate the pieces of the big picture, which is precisely why I end up loving so many things as I do, and why Atal and I are now connected here as we are. So
yeah, definitely. Thank you, Brian. And I think
Brian.
that's such an amazing introduction of yourself, because I mean, as I look at your life, you have got the best of the world in terms of education, and your curiosity is so high still to kind of like learn and teach and guide. And that just inspires me so much. Your passion for helping humanity at large is very inspiring to me. So I want to understand from your perspective, you know, I kind of talk myself as a spiritual person, and I think my spiritual side is like, you know, when I think about my Ironman race, let's say, I didn't sign up for this race for the entire year because I didn't want to do this as a goal-oriented mindset person. And then I signed up and I ran this race in 10 days. And I was jumping in the water after 14 months. And all I say is I was just focused on the sun. As the sun was going, I was like, this is my only connection. And that's how I look at spirituality. But you know, this kind of keeps me do things which a lot of humans think this is extraordinary. But from my perspective, this is just so ordinary. So how do you look at it?
So just to be clear on the it in the question there, what is the it that I'm looking at? Is it spirituality broadly as an aspect of spirituality, or is it something orthogonal to that?
Yeah. So what do you think about science and spirituality coming together? What are like your understanding of, okay, here I am a scientist,
Yeah.
and I look at data and variation in human, and here there is this concept of spirituality, which I mean, I don't think there is any data. I mean, what is the data around connection with this sun, you know, if we think about human life? But then there is this connection which I feel very internal to me,
Right.
which motivates me and which makes me do things which are hard to achieve. And what is like the belief system, you know?
I get it. So this is a great question. And it's a great question because it touches upon the potential for certain forms of metamagical thinking.
Mhm,
It's a mouthful.
mhm, mhm,
As in getting into questions about the supernatural and religion and how that might tie in with spirituality. And clearly, there are aspects of spirituality that do align with certain forms of magical thinking, religiosity, the supernatural, and so on. But spirituality need not weave in to those things. either. Meaning, as I found, say, as a scientist, so just to be clear on one important thing, I'm agnostic philosophically. And so to be clear then even on that, so that was a word slash concept coined by Thomas Henry Huxley back during Darwin's time to capture and describe a state of not knowing. Meaning, I don't know if the supernatural exists. I also don't know if the supernatural does exist. All I can say is, like, I don't know. And there's a whole rabbit hole of how we define God concepts and details that we're going to gloss over. But the short of it is, nobody knows. It is a genuine and objective question mark at this point in history, is that we don't know a yes or a no. And so if one wants to embrace and lean in to a supernatural side of spirituality, of course, they have the freedom to do that. There may not be evidence per se behind that worldview, but they can certainly still lean into it and embrace a lot of the emotional themes that come with a mental connection to a perception of the supernatural. The weave in there with spirituality being that common transcendent thread, the weave in is that I can do the same thing even if I'm agnostic. And I'm not going to assert the supernatural exists or doesn't exist. I'm just going to say, like, look, we don't know. There's not evidence. We can't say.
Yeah.
Even if that's my position philosophically, just because that's all we can say objectively at this point in time. I can still go outside, feel the morning warmth of the sun on my skin, leaning into the fact that I'm a product of an evolutionary history with a certain physiology that's dialed in to experience certain sensations when I feel that warmth on my skin, or when I feel a sense of social connection, when I feel a degree of emotional intimacy with another human being, or even when, as a scientist, I can, say, watch a bird fly through the sky or watch a hummingbird zip somewhere, stop, hover, move backward, forward, backward, and then zip off somewhere else. I can understand that intellectually in a very deep level, mechanistically, what exactly is going on there. But because I understand it at that level, it permits me to see a beauty and therefore almost a connection and a sense of spirituality with that moment, probably physiologically in a very, very similar, if not even identical way, that the religious person might be feeling a sense of spiritual connection with whatever they may feel connected to as well as even every shade of gray in between. So I would say broadly, even just objectively, best I can evaluate, that's how I see spirituality. It need not embrace religiosity. It need not deny religiosity. Spirituality is something that can transcend many facets of the human experience.
That's so amazing how you pointed that out, because the way I think about it is like, there is this intellect. We all are intellectual people. And I mean, being in Bay Area, I have seen so many smart people who are going to like, okay, this is truth. And they will start going into probability. And here I'm talking about something which not a lot of people would be like, hey, I don't know what this guy is talking about, right? And I keep talking like, hey, I just looked at the rising sun, and that just keeps me going, because I'm like, okay, in this human life, is starting with like birth and death. I mean, what are the things which remain? And I am like, this rising sun is going to remain, and I would just keep looking at it. But it's very hard for people to relate to it, because I'm just like on my own zone in some ways, and this works for me. And I mean, at the same time, sometimes I get that self-doubt, just like, okay, whether people think me as crazy because this is not defined by science. And that's where, I mean, now I'm like, okay, now I'm a lot more confident to be able to talk about what I believe in. But for the longest time, I had such a hard time kind of like even sharing my opinions about my connection with these things, which do not transcend into a very strong relation into our intellectual self. But I know personally, this is what helps me live a better life. So, that's where I'm coming from.
And look, I think that's a great place to come from, because for too long, the discipline of psychology has been siloed into its own department in academic institutions, as in it's been often treated as there is the brain on the one hand, then there is the body on the other hand. And the two are not fundamentally interconnected, at least as history has suggested. Most researchers throughout time have not treated them as fundamentally interconnected. There's been this mind-body duality or dualism, kind of this split between the mind and body. But like, as we know, and increasingly, as we're understanding, there is a fundamental and inseparable interrelationship between what's going on in your head, as in your brain / the mind, as well as what is going on in the rest of your body. And so if you wake up every morning and you are practicing gratitude or practicing appreciating something such as the sun, or reading certain emotions into your experience with the sun, then as we know with everything, as you practice, you get better at what you are practicing, right? If you want to be a kinder person, practice being kind. You want to practice, or if you want to be a better a-hole, practice being an a-hole. You will get better at being rude to people, right? Like, practice goes a long way. But that's a something that is catalyzed by and reinforced by what's going on in your mind. And so if you're waking up every morning and finding some emotional connection that you're feeling with the sun, and that's taking place in your mind, given the unavoidable mind-body integration, then practicing the emotions you're experiencing that you're developing and cultivating and nurturing, say with something such as the sun, is going to feed into some predisposition to perhaps act in a way now, behave in a way, using your body to behave in a way that is an extension of those initial emotions, that sense of connection that started in your brain as it relates to that external stimulus called morning sun. So I mean,
Brian,
I think fundamentally, like it is all integrated.
So I think what you are touching on is in a way called as confirmation bias. So like, let's say once I believe in something, then I will try to convince my mind into that same theory for in a way. So it starts with emotions, an emotional connection, but it keeps going back into that, okay, yes, this is what I want to believe in, and this is what I'm moving towards, and I keep doing it. And on the other side, I keep learning that we all need to be aware of this confirmation bias in our mind, so that we are not making dumb decisions. We are smarter about our decisions, knowing that this might be a confirmation bias. So I get confused about where to put this boundary, where I'm like, okay, this is my domain and this is what I know. At the same time, I want to be aware of my own bias,
Completely. And as you look, you're touching upon an amazing point, because all of this will ultimately depend on your goals, right? Do you want to fool yourself into thinking reality is different from what it is, if that feeds back to harm you? However, if you can leverage an important detail, some small thing, such as your appreciation for and connection with the morning sun, if you can leverage that mentally, and you're leaning into it, and maybe you've convinced yourself, and let's just pause on that for a second here, just to be in sync with what it means to like convince oneself, right? What that even means as a concept here. So as I would see it, if you're practicing and reinforcing this mental and emotional connection with a morning sun via ritual and whatever else is tied to it, then you are rewiring your brain. That's a consequence of how you are behaving. You think a thought, you rewire your brain. Your thoughts quite literally create your brain. And so if you are engaging with a moment repeatedly, such as, again, a morning sun, then if the act of doing so is rewiring your brain, and therefore if your brain has connections with the rest of your body that ends up manifesting as behavior, then is it really fair to say, or to perhaps even dismiss that as you're just convincing yourself of something, right? And like at its root, you are kind of convincing yourself of something,
Mhm.
but you're convincing yourself because your brain is being rewired based upon the experiences that you are having and that you are creating. And
Yeah.
so first off, that's just a thought, and I think a valuable one, because if your thoughts are rewiring your brain and that's feeding into your body, which is feeding into your actions, then I mean, that is, as it seems, the mechanistic link that goes from leveraging an externality
Mhm.
and using that externality, as emotional as it may have begun,
Mhm.
using that externality and channeling it toward a very rational outcome, which is
Mm.
perhaps, you know what, I want to wake up, I want to be fired up to do Ironman again next year, whatever it may
Yeah.
be, and I can leverage the sun as an externality and the emotional
Mm.
connection that I get with it and channel that toward a very rational goal that I'm ultimately looking to aspire to achieve.
That's such a great way to look at it. I'm leveraging the outside circumstances in a way to move
Yeah.
forward in a direction I want to move towards. I think here's one other question comes to my mind. I'm a truth seeker, I keep searching for truth. So now I am curious now. So what is the absolute truth? In a way, I'm feeling like, okay, this is just my truth, like
Yeah.
leveraging the sun, rising sun to
Right, right.
channel this energy. So is there any absolute truth in this whole thing, like in this whole world?
Great question.
Yes.
This is a great question. So
Uh-huh.
I get this often,
Mhm.
and also just to take one step back on here on like, what I mean by I get this often. One of the things that inspired me to take my education seriously was in very early stages, getting involved in the creation evolution conversation. And this means engaging with fellow students who were some form of creation. The earth is 6,000 years old. Evolution is nonsense. A lot of geology and earth history is nonsense, et cetera, et cetera. And so just one quick question has just got to pop up saying internet connection is unstable. Are we cutting in and out, or are we good?
I think for a second you did cut out. I am hoping this is not on my side, um, but I could not hear you. Your voice did got messed up for a second.
Okay, so no worries. We can start that over, make sure that we're clear on that point
Yeah.
here.
Yes.
So just in short, the summary is absolute truth. I stumbled into this because of an early fascination engaging with young earth creationists. And it turns out it's a core question at the heart of the philosophy of science that transcends all disciplines. And so when we say absolutes, if, just to be clear that you and I are communicating, if we can be comfortable equating absolute with 100% certainty, hence it's absolute, right? Then is there such thing, as best we can evaluate, is there such thing as absolute truth in science? And the answer, as best as we can evaluate, is no. Meaning even the no, even that statement, no, there's no such thing as an absolute truth in science, even that is a probabilistic statement. It's a statement with a probability that is very, very high. But as best we can evaluate, science is not about absolute truths. It's about statistical or probabilistic truths. And by that, we just simply mean something that is not 100.000 ad infinitum percent. And we also mean not something that is 0.000, etc. percent. We are dealing with probability in some shade of gray that is a non-zero on through a non-100. It can be very high, very low, or someplace in the middle. And so when we think about absolute truth, as a scientist, I would not be comfortable saying that anything that I understand about the world or think I understand about the world is an absolute truth. And then say similarly with, say, the mind of someone who is spiritual, whether that is a religious spirituality or a non-religious spirituality, I would not be comfortable saying that anything that that person believes is absolute truth either. However, to them, it is something that perhaps they've convinced themselves of, right? And in that way, it is quote unquote true to them subjectively. It is true to them subjectively, but that does not mean that what they happen to believe is a quote absolute truth objectively via comparison to the rest of the world. That's how I would consider it.
So now I think I love how you have put it together as like there is no absolute truth in the world. It's the game of probability, and there is all this variation that happens from human to human in a way. So I think now I want to look at how society is there, the human community that we live in. Because when I think about society kind of acts like, okay, this is the right way to live, and you meet people around all around where they are like, hey, this is my model, this is the right thing, go ahead. And here I struggle where I'm like, okay, so have you figured out life? And I'm like, okay, so what should I do? Should I just like keep searching for my own truth, or should I just keep following you? But at the same time, I'm like, there is all this weight of the world that comes onto me as if they have figured out life. And I'm like, have you figured out life? I mean, I look at all these Silicon Valley investors too sometimes. I'm like, okay, so you make mistakes too, because all the money is lost, in all these new technology. You couldn't find the right people. So here's how I'm coming from. I'm like, okay, so what should a human do who is like kind of stuck in this weight of the world?
This is a tremendous question, Atal. Are there generalized and unified answers that we know based on evidence that we can pull from and leverage in order to live our best lives and be happy and satisfied? Just to be clear, would you say that that is a fair reframing of your original question?
Yeah,
Are
correct.
there are there generalized rules based on evidence that we can pull from, use, and leverage to live our best lives and optimize, dial in whatever we're hoping to achieve? Fair
True,
enough?
because yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Okay. So good. So the answer there is perhaps unsurprisingly a yes and a no. And here's what I mean by that. The yes is that yes, we are all human. And being human, there are certain things that will make us happy. There are certain things that will make us satisfied. There are certain ways to behave that will create in us and enrich our lives a sense of connection with nature, a sense of connection with other human beings. And those are pretty much universal, common to everybody. That's the yes part. But the no part is we're not all identical. Right? As you just mentioned a moment ago, we vary. I'm me, of course, you're you. We are unique in the true sense of that word, unique as in one of a kind. As in whether it's the shape of your feet, the size of your toes, the texture of your hair, there's not a single other person on this planet at all that can come in and fill your shoes identically and replace you perfectly as you are. That is the nature of your uniqueness, right? One of a kind. And so despite that, though, despite the fact that you are one of a kind at the level of variation, you are also human. And so you are both kind of that generalist and specialist, as I was mentioning a moment ago at the outset, meaning there are certain traits specific to you, and there are other traits that are common with everybody. And so what we can do is leverage what we know about what creates human happiness, what helps to foster and cultivate human health, mentally and physically, what we know about human behavior and how that can feed back to create a happy life or a miserable life. We can leverage all of that stuff based on years and years of study and research into this larger cohort called the human population, subsets therein. But that does not mean there is also variation, because there is. And so what you need to then do is simultaneously pull from what we know and understand about human happiness and satisfaction and longevity and connection and sociality and all this stuff. You need to simultaneously pull from that, as well as know thyself. Don't forget about you, because you vary compared to everybody else. So what are those details that allow you to connect with certain things that other people might miss, that will allow you to create quite a bit of icing or frosting on that beautiful foundation, on that edifice, on that cake, to live your best life for you, so you're not simply trying to follow the average of what it might otherwise be to live an average life as a human being.
Got it. So now I think adding to that point, as you're saying, there is a variation, you got to know yourself deep inside, as well as understand there are some kind of hypothesis about happiness and health, or which actually not absolute still, I guess, but still there is like a higher probability of success, right?
Right.
That's what we were trying to say. At the same time, so you can leverage all those things to improve the quality of your life, right? That's
Perfect. Yeah.
okay.
And you can leverage all those things, and by just so we're clear, all those things, you mean based on what we know about human behavior, what leads to happiness and satisfaction and contentment and all these things, there are certain themes that transcend the human experience. They are based on evidence. We can pull from those themes, leverage them, and use them to at least create a solid foundation upon which we can improve and live our best lives via that process of improvement, via hypothesis testing, iteration, and eventually, ultimately, knowing thyself.
Got it. Awesome. So I think now my other question comes in. When you think about the society as a whole, there are some standards in which people are evaluated. If I talk about the job, they have a process to like evaluate a candidate for a job, which is one part of the system. And then the health, as we go into the healthcare system, they are like, we're going to treat you for this injury in this specific way. But what are your like thoughts about these systems which exist to treat everyone on a equal basis? And here I am, which we are talking about my uniqueness.
That's right, indeed. Look, you nailed it. This is one of the single greatest places where these systems fail. By trying to treat everybody the same, you end up stripping people of their humanity. That's the reality of it. As in, stripping someone of their humanity is to strip them of their uniqueness, strip them of the uniqueness of their data point, how they differ, how they vary, what makes them special relative to everybody else. To be fair, there's a lot of variation in the world, right? We just rolled over the 8 billion persons mark on this planet, meaning there are now 8 billion plus people on planet Earth. If you want to understand variation at that level in the billions upon billions, that's a huge undertaking, right? So to understand what makes each of these 8+ billion people unique, that's a lot of information you're going to have to sift through. And so human minds tend to think in stereotypes. They tend to think in types, meaning if you're going to eat an apple that's resting on a table, chances are it's not a poison apple. It's an apple that's going to be reasonably decent, right? That's thinking in stereotypes. You're sitting on a chair. You got to sit down on a chair. Probabilistically, thinking stereotypically, it's probably not an exploding chair, right? It's probably a regular chair, so you're going to sit on it. It's often an effective mental heuristic to think in stereotypes, to think in averages in that way, and to therefore standardize across a great number of things. If we thought in terms of variation across the board, which like the best of us try to do, we don't always succeed. Again, it's just there are a lot more data there to ultimately manage. And so if you are part of HR and hiring committee or something they're in, or if you are a physician locked in your practice within the medical industrial complex, these are, as we know, often systems that practice or proceed with a practice that's called a standard of care, where you try to treat everybody virtually the same while kind of giving a head nod to variation, but not giving so much of a head nod to variation that you are willing to go out on a limb and practice what's called personalized medicine, or often sometimes as it is referred to, N of 1 medicine, as in you are a sample size of 1. But as we know, and we definitely know this because the times are changing.
Mm-hmm.
Please, that was just the brief last thought there. The times are changing, as in the medical system is changing now. We're at early stages of transforming from standardized care or these standards of care to what's called personalized medicine, where you are treated much more as the individual as opposed to much more as an average.
Got it. So I think here's my question that is popping in my mind. Now we are talking about uniqueness of a human, and I think we would both would agree that when a human brings their uniqueness, their true self to the world, that's where humanity gets the benefit the most. Where as a system, as a whole, as human race, we will get most benefit if they bring their true self and unique self. So from a humanity perspective, yes, we have standardized a lot of systems, and yes, we are moving in healthcare from a personalized approach. How do you look at it? Like, how can we get there faster where we can bring every human's best out in the world? And yeah, I know it's like a game of probability and it's a lot of challenge, but how do we move fast in this direction so that every human can share their true gifts with the world?
Great question. And I think ultimately, at present, in this current stage of human civilization, we have to leverage technology. And by leveraging technology, we mean big data, we mean artificial intelligence and machine learning and algorithms and number crunching therein, as in gathering not just huge quantities of data, but also, perhaps even more importantly, oftentimes, quality data, leveraging those data in order to better understand people as they are, from the psychological on through the physical, in order to make the best decisions, not because, say, some AI is telling us the answer, but because we are working with certain forms of artificial intelligence alongside human intelligence, so that we can collectively get to a more effective answer than either of us were operating independently. So just in short, not just more data, but better quality of data, so that we can better understand all of the variation that makes up the human condition. So we're not treating people as averages, but so that we can personalize things far more than the landscape currently prescribes.
Got it. So I think the next question that comes to my mind is like, now I know what I want from life in a lot of ways, right? But I think there was a point in my life where I didn't know what I want from life. And I think a lot of people also go through a similar journey.
Yeah.
So I think my question is like, if someone doesn't know themselves,
Right.
how would you help them get to where they want to go, or what is their unique self? So I mean, it's a lot of work which happens internally, I guess, in a human being. But at the same time, like, I mean, how would we bring their true gifts to the world until they know what their true gifts are?
This is a tremendous question, Atal, truly. And here's why I say this, because there is a lot of conversation about that. And there's a lot of conversation about it because we often hear from so many people, even very well accomplished people, follow your passion, follow your passion. And for people who are already effing passionate, say like you and I are clearly passionate, it's not hard to follow our passion, right? However, there are a lot of people, maybe they're struggling with mental health challenges, or stagnant or stuck or something in their lives, or maybe they just never had it. Maybe they're just at an early stage because maybe they're not even yet a teenager, or whatever it is. They're just trying to wrap their minds around this thing called life, and they don't know that answer. What am I passionate about? They don't have those answers there. But what they do have, more probably, or probabilistically, right? What they likely do have is something called curiosity. We are social animals. We are social primates. We are curious animals. And so even if you are not yet passionate about something, in order to quote unquote follow that passion, you are probably, and most likely, curious about at least something. And so if you are, say, not yet following your passion, but if you can start off by, say, following your curiosity, then following your curiosity will lead you to things that interest you more than your initial interest initially happens to be. And by following your curiosity and discovering certain things, what you are then simultaneously discovering are certain aspects of who you are, aspects of yourself. Oh, this is really cool. This fascinates me. Why does it fascinate me? Reflect on that question. Know thyself in that capacity. And through multiple iterations of that, I'm curious about this. Let me follow it. Where does it lead me? Oh, that's really cool. I'm curious about this new thing. Let me follow it. Where does it lead me? That's really cool. Why is it cool? Why do I think this is fascinating? Know thyself. Know thyself. Iterate, iterate, iterate. And through multiple rounds of this, you eventually do come to know yourself far more than, of course, you had previously known. But it can be very difficult for people to get there simply by following their passion unless they're already passionate. And so an easier lead-in, kind of a step zero, the zeroth order lead-in is follow your curiosity probabilistically, easy way to get in there, open the door to knowing thyself.
Amazing. I think that's definitely a great way. Now I'm going to ask you so there are a lot of people who are going through mental health challenges that they are kind of stuck in their own life at this point, and they don't even feel curious about anything. I remember my own episode of depression, that where I was like struggling about finding purpose for myself every single day. And I didn't know what to do at that point. I was like, I don't know what to do, and I don't feel passionate about anything. There is no curiosity. I just kept going and spending time in nature. And I don't know how I healed myself through this journey. And I don't know how to back that up through science or anything. But I know that there are people who are in that phase. And I want to like get your perspective on, okay, if someone is not curious about anything at this point, how do they beat this kind of like problem in their mind to be curious about human life?
This is great. So to be transparent here as well, then, so you mentioned certain struggles with mental health and depression, however long ago it might have been for you at this point. About 7 years ago, I was dare I say victim, but I don't know a better word, but certainly the recipient of medical malpractice, or victim of medical malpractice. And it was such a degree that it laid me out flat. Meaning, if you've seen the movie The Princess Bride, one of these classic, iconic movies with a borderline cult following, there's a main character, Wesley, who ends up in this device called the Machine that at the underlying physiological level transforms his body from, vibrant 20-something-year-old self to a 80, 90, 100-plus-year-old man on the inside. That's how I felt. I was just ruined. And I thought, I'm going to need government assistance or, some form of permanent assistance in some capacity. That's how broken I was. And in those rapid changes in our lives, depression is indeed often something that follows, right? And we know this even acutely, even if it's not long-term depression, the mental health spikes and challenges that follow. In prison, for example, do you know when the greatest number of suicides take place in prison?
No, I have no clue.
It's the night of incarceration. When someone goes in, those cell bars lock, and you think, I'm in this, something is never going to be the same again. And my life, therefore, is never going to be the same again. And you have yet to settle into that new baseline. That's when the suicide rates, based on what we know about evidence, seem to spike. And so in this case, being laid out flat, I began to become, very quickly became depressed. And the only way I was able to get through that, fully acknowledging the massive support of my parents who helped me, the only way I was able to get through that and perhaps find motivation behind curiosity to do something important was to practice gratitude, which I know we always hear popularly, but it works. Practice gratitude even for simple things like being able to breathe, or to be able to stand up, or to be able to have toothpaste to brush your teeth, etc. Just practicing gratitude, which, like we were discussing a moment ago, the things you practice, you get better at. Practice gratitude. That was one big thing. And the other big thing was really a case of having to almost steel man my way mentally through the situation, knowing deep down rationally that there is an evidence base upon which I can pull in order to recover from this. And so knowing that deep down, even if I didn't have or didn't feel that vibrant vivaciousness that perhaps you hear in the inflection in my voice or the squint in my eyes right now, right? Even if that was not yet there at that point, I knew I had it previously at some point in my life. I knew maybe I didn't experience it in that moment, say after getting out of this abuse in the hospital, but I knew it was there at some point. I just didn't feel it in that moment. All I felt was depression and despair. And so practicing gratitude is one thing that at least got me to that first step. And then a mind over matter state of mind where I knew that I could pull from and leverage scientific data to help me move through steps 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so on. That's what ultimately led to that first spark coming back, to that second spark coming back, and to eventually that emotional fire at the core of my being that has ultimately yet to extinguish itself, but which certainly took a major hit several years ago after I went into and came out of the proverbial machine at the heart of the medical industrial complex. So, just in short, the answer, gratitude, mind over matter, knowing that, look, there are data that we can pull from, however foreign they may seem to us. There is evidence you can pull from to help yourself. You have to know them. And so knowing that plus practicing gratitude is ultimately what led to the curiosity to spark the fire, helping me get out of it.
Got it. So I think this is great. And I think I have been through the same journey, and I think practicing gratitude definitely helped me get over it. And I think this is just the concept of just giving away things to others, just like sharing what you have received already, and what you are right now. And yes, practicing breathing. And I remember this quote from Rumi, gratitude is the wine of the soul, go on, get drunk. And when I read this and I was going through a phase, I'm like, okay, so this helps me feel better. Wow. So I wrote this quote on my walls. And then I think this book from Marcus, where Marcus says, I keep reminding myself, Marcus is like one of the legends in human history. And he writes, what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to think, to enjoy, to love, to give. So I think that also quote resonated with me, because I was like, okay, so this is one of the most powerful person in the universe who has lived through, and he has to write this in his own book in Meditations. So then I realized, no, depression is something which is not happening unique to me. It's not, because if Marcus had to write this for himself, then I am just another human being on this planet who is going through the same thing, which means we all are experiencing life, and these are experiences which are a part of this human life. And that helped me feel a lot better. I'm like, okay, so now I'm not alone in this. And I think in that moment, I was feeling like, why do I have to deal with all this? I didn't sign up for a life with the no purpose, because I always had purpose before, and passion. I lost passion in life, and I'm like, okay, this is not this without passion, what is worth living? And now I'm back in this space where I'm able to start a podcast, and this is just coming out of pure passion. And I'm like able to realize how I have transitioned from everyone telling me that, hey, you should do this. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do anything. I do not care. I do not care about money. I do not want to even do anything with anyone else. I just lost purpose. And now I'm like, okay, no, I want to share more and more about my life, my journey, what I've gone through. And that is so fulfilling to myself.
Agreed. There are, as I process, two great points that you've shared just there. One, which is the one you just mentioned, which is helping others, right? This is another way, just like gratitude. And this is also something supported by data. There is a lot of happiness and a lot of satisfaction that comes from helping other people. And the second point, and so we'll circle back to both of these, but helping others, great way to help yourself feel better. And the second point, which I thought was a spectacular one, back to gratitude, also solidly based on data. We know the practice of gratitude will help you feel better, just like helping other people will help you feel better. You said at the outset of your last set of statements. You practice gratitude to help you feel better. And why I think that's such a valuable statement is especially the last few words of it, to help you feel better. And I know that may seem trivial simply to reiterate those words, but what I mean by that is in the art of practicing all of these things, helping us feel better, the human mind is very observant. And I say that because if you know that practicing gratitude, say with the sunrise, engaging with the sun and the light and the warmth, as we were just discussing a moment ago, if you observe that practicing gratitude in that moment helps you feel better, and perhaps even helps you feel better uniquely because it's a special kind of practice of gratitude, right? Then you're going to remember that. And not just remembering that practicing gratitude in context helps you feel better, but if you can remember it and not just remember it, but know it, you know what? Hey, I now know every single morning when I get up, when I greet the sun with the sunrise and I'm present as in me and the sun and that experience and this dance of life. If I know that that's going to help me feel better, now the cool thing, you can predict the future. How rad is that? Meaning
Wow.
you can predict your future because of observations you have made in the past. Observations, when I do this, when I do that, practice gratitude in context, etc., I feel better. And so I then know every subsequent time when I do that same thing, what's very likely going to happen? I'm going to feel better, right? Easy.
Yeah.
Now, so we were discussing, say, offline, how to engineer your environment, right?
Yes.
If you can now not just observe an experience, but observe an experience and connect it with your ability to predict the future, you can now link all of those observations and all of those predictions with a larger set of behaviors that you engage in order to engineer an environment where all of the probabilities of predicting this, predicting that, all of those probabilities are now stacked in your favor from the second you open your eyes to the second you open your eyes in the morning, to the second you shut them at night, on through every shade in between. If you've engineered that environment, if you stack those probabilities in a way that allows you to predict the future, then now you are engaged in this probabilistic dance where happiness, satisfaction, meaning, and reward in life are mostly not random. They are non-random. They are engineered. They're highly probabilistic. And now, chances are, any day of the year, upon decades, there's a much higher probability that you're going to be happy living the life that you want because you've engineered it to be just that.
Wow, that's such an amazing way to kind of tap into our other topic because, as I learned that gratitude is something that works for me, I added a habit to my lifestyle in the morning where I burn incense in front of kind of whatever I believe in. And I'm like, I do it every day. I'm like, thank you so much for allowing me to breathe and another beautiful day in paradise. And I keep writing this, have a beautiful day in paradise. Let's live today because it's not forever. And that just helps me have a better present moment and be able to share. And I realized when I realized that, okay, this is what it makes me feel, gratitude. I added it as a habit to my current lifestyle in the morning because I'm like, this helps me live a better day than the day I was living when I was not having this as a habit. So that's where I think kind of like forming those habits help us. And I added it into my current schedule of habits, my morning ritual, so I can do that every day.
Yeah, like this is such a great point because it taps on so many aspects of a morning ritual, for example. So statistically, and at least in the West, I don't know, I'm sure increasingly as the world is globalized, this is increasingly a global problem, perhaps putting hunter-gatherers aside because they've solved many aspects of their existence independent of the rest of us. But for most of the rest of us, at least statistically, a lot of people struggle with sleep. And also a lot of people struggle with stress. And so if you had a crap night's sleep and you're waking up, you're not feeling your best, it's like, it's another equivalent of a Monday morning. I don't want to do this or I don't want to do that. But because you've trained yourself via a ritual, via a habit, you know that okay, fine. If I get out of bed and if I burn incense, I know when I do that, I'm going to feel better. So I've done it every single time previously the last several months, and I feel better every time I do it. Okay. Boom. Now you're out of bed. Maybe you've even made your bed for like the first wind of the morning. You're burning incense. Okay, right. Exactly. Just as I predicted, I'm feeling better now, even if I'm stressed, even if I was stressed perhaps a bit, and it was a crap night's sleep. But that can translate to anything. Maybe it's not just burning incense. Maybe it's a morning run. Maybe it's a morning workout. Maybe it's a morning meditation, a morning whatever, some aspect of a morning ritual. If you've made enough observations to the point where you now have a working model of reality, you can turn that working model of reality into a set of predictions for the future, then probabilistically, now you can engineer the arc of that day, the arc of that decade, the arc of that life to make happiness, satisfaction, meaning, value, and so on far more likely to occur than randomness.
Amazing. I think we touched on a very important topic, which is morning habits and morning rituals, right?
Yeah.
So I think, yes, morning rituals are great, and I'm a morning person, and I don't know how the transition happened because I was never a morning person in my life. And it so happened that it naturally, when I moved to America from India, and I just started waking up early and I started liking it and I kept going with it, And yes, I think a very important part of it is actually to sleep early. And when I sleep early, I end up getting up on time. And I'm very particular about my hours of sleep because I realized the day I don't sleep properly, the next day is not worth living for,
Right.
So I messed that up and I learned that the hard way.
So
Yeah.
let's say apologies for interrupting. Let's just pause on that one thought because you said something so brilliant, right in line with what we were just discussing.
Yeah.
You just said, I know when I don't sleep properly, and then the rest of it was what? When I don't sleep properly, then
the next day is gone. It's not worth living for.
Right? So that alone,
Uh-huh.
you are an observant primate. You just made a fantastic observation. When I do something or when I don't do something, the next day is impacted, it's impaired, it's crap in some capacity.
Yeah.
Now you can predict the future. So if you can predict the future, now it's okay. Do I want to feel like shit tomorrow? I do want to feel like shit tomorrow. Therefore, I'm going to neglect my sleep. You can predict that. You can create that future. However, if you want to reflect perhaps more deeply, say, you know what? Last day, yesterday, I felt like shit. I don't like feeling that way. So I want to create a different future for myself. Okay, cool. Let's get behind this different future. Now I'm going to go to bed on time, as in a bit earlier, so I'm not neglecting my health. And not just that, not only am I going to go to bed a bit earlier, I'm going to nurture myself to bed, meaning I'm going to have kind of a sleep sequence where maybe I shower to first absorb a bunch of heat, to then dump and radiate a lot of that body heat, aka a cooler core body temperature actually helps you to fall asleep more easily. Maybe you're going to foam roll and stretch and kind of like wind yourself down a bit more that way. Maybe you're going to read, aka you're cutting off all forms of stimulation from social media, whatever else it may be. You're going to do a lot of things to nurture yourself to sleep. Why? Not just because you love yourself, but because you're engineering that environment. You're realizing that a crap night's sleep leads to feeling like crap the next day. You can predict that future, you can create that future, and there are behavioral steps you can take, knowledge you can leverage the previous night to generate that very outcome you set before.
So I think now
in short, your statement was brilliant.
I love how you described it. And yes, I try to do most of it where I kind of predicted, and I'm slowly making progress in that direction. Here's my challenge that comes to my mind all the time. I become like a morning person. It's amazing, right? Getting up early in the morning and sleeping early. But then, I have all these friends who are like more of night owls and they want to go out. And, I have to miss out on all these things in the night. And I mean, that's the same question. I know that I'm going to feel shit if I don't, sleep on time. At the same time, I want to hang out with my friends. And I think it becomes a problem in our here and there, but I'm just curious, what's your point of view?
May I tell you a secret? This is my life too. This is my life. Like every aspect of this is my life. It's like, God, it's whether it's being around people who don't want to eat the food that I want to eat, and they're pressuring, oh, just try one of these, I don't want to eat that, right? Or if it's being around people, however great they may be, they're perhaps a bit more biologically predisposed to be night owls. And then culturally, that's reinforcing that with, kind of nightlife and night culture. They want to go out and do those things. But simultaneously, I cannot help but think on my end, with respect to, say, boundaries, wanting to engineer and create my successful future. Do I want to go out tonight? And do I want to go out tonight knowing that the next day I'm not going to feel so hot again, because I've already run that test, as we were just discussing a moment ago. Crap night's sleep is a crap next day. Do I want to feel like crap the next day? That's going to be a decision that you're going to have to make, right? But I think here's the beautiful point there, is that this touches nicely on something we were discussing a moment ago about absolute truth versus kind of the subjectivity and subjective truths, if you will. So in other words, do I want to feel like crap the next day, knowing that I deprived myself of sleep one night? I cannot tell you, even like, say, like as someone, as whether it's a practicing scientist or anybody else, they can't, no, there's no one that can say you are behaving incorrectly by choosing to go out with your friends. That statement in a larger scientific framework is just like, does not compute. Like, it just probabilistically, scientifically doesn't work. I cannot tell you that you're behaving incorrectly. There's no such thing as a wrong behavior. Instead, all we can do is speak in probabilistic terms, as in, probabilistically, if you go out and you deprive yourself of sleep, you're not going to feel great the next day. Done, right? We can all get behind that statement. It's not even a controversial statement, right? But then what you have to do, leveraging that scientific and probabilistic statement, we know that sleep deprivation leads to ill mental health on average for a lot of people, right? You then have to make a decision. What are your goals? What kind of future, what kind of environment do you want to engineer? What are your goals? And it's another place where it's like, as a scientist, I cannot tell you your goals. Those are insights, answers that you need to discover for yourself, certain subjectivities you need to discover for yourself. And so based on whatever those goals are, again, I can't tell you, you have to discover them. You then have to make an evidence-based, aka an informed decision. What are your goals? And based on those very rational as well as very emotional goals in life, you can then begin to make decisions. That is, you can begin to behave in a way that will get you to your goals, or you can perhaps fall victim to poor decisions and behave in a way that's not going to get you to your goals. That's it. I think just as objectively as I can capture it, that's the nature of that situation. There is evidence we can pull from that we know can help to enrich human health mentally and physically and enrich the human experience. But then simultaneously, there are certain subjectivities that only you can discover for yourself, such as, what are your goals in life? What do you want to achieve? And then based on whatever those answers are, they will be very emotional answers, right? I want to do this. And like, no surprise, because you're fired up about it, right? You then work to deconstruct a very rational framework, a set of steps, action steps, and so on, as a vehicle to get you to those very emotional goals. Whether it's, even if it's just something small, such as, I want to feel fantastic the next day. How do I put boundaries in place with my friends? That would be an action step, so that they know, look, we can have a great time during the day, but there's a boundary with me, because I start getting ready for bed at 6 p.m. True. And I'm asleep by 8 p.m. And when I'm awake, you know what? We love each other. We're up early, or maybe we're not up early for some of them. And we can have a great day when that day comes. And we can connect and have intimate experiences when that day comes. But they know that, okay, fine, that's cool. Brian has a boundary. It's called basically like 6 p.m. is when sleep sequence starts. and he's asleep by maybe 8 p.m. around there, so he can be up early because he loves being up early. That's Brian. And if I love Brian, I'm going to respect that boundary. So it's up to you to try and really religiously defend those boundaries so that you can work to cultivate the life that you want, that is as aligned with the people you want in your life as well. That's how I would approach it. And that's actually how I do approach it.
Wow, amazing. That's so amazing, Brian. I kind of feel like there is so much to learn from you. And I think I have begun to, like, as I'm interacting with you, I've begun to start thinking in a very similar way, framework that you have defined in your life. So I think just to, like, kind of conclude this discussion about what the user or the person who is listening or watching can take away, I think one of the here some things I can point out and you can add to it. I think one is about depression and going through a mental health challenge is very normal as you go through your journey, and losing all your sense of purpose or mission is okay. And curiosity can get you out of it. But if you don't even find curiosity, you might need help from the community and find people who kind of help you, and keep looking inside what makes you feel better versus not. So that what makes you feel better, you can do more of it in your lifestyle and keep making progress until you find that curiosity about something which can be something you can feel passionate about. The other thing I think we touched about is about healthy boundaries, right? You want to add something?
Yeah, just one thing quickly before we move on to healthy boundaries.
Yes.
Beyond gratitude, beyond curiosity, when we think about leveraging scientific information to help us not just feel better, but perhaps to uplift us and at least get us beyond that dungeon baseline down and depressive state, there are quality scientific data that link any sense of progress with happiness, even if it's something small. I got up today, I did 5 push-ups. I did 1 push-up. I did 6 push-ups. I did 7 push-ups, whatever. A sense of progress is also linked to happiness. And so even if you don't feel like doing the effing push-up, just know, you have to know rationally. You have to know and not deny reality. You have to know that there are quality scientific data that we can pull from, even if it's something such as a simple thing such as progress. And progress can only come, it can even come, I should say, even as just a single push-up. You can leverage that and know that doing that one thing, accomplishing that one thing will help you feel just a little bit better. And then you can add maybe one more thing the next day and one more thing the next day. And however much you may not feel like doing it in the moment, we can pull from known scientific information to help you feel better if curiosity and gratitude and some of those other levers are not working for you to the degree that you might otherwise wish. So that was the other thought.
Yeah. That's amazing. Like maybe a small thing like just making your bed, because that makes you feel better, so that's one thing. The other is about healthy boundaries, which we talked about, that sometimes it's possible that you might be pushed around with your boundaries, especially when you know that your next day might be shit. So you want to make sure your people know that this is how you live and this is what makes you feel better. At the same time, that's a decision that you got to make in that moment, that what you prefer, hanging out with your friends versus maybe having a shit day next day, so you got to make that decision for yourself.
Yeah. Hey, look, I mean, I get it. This is the question I'm asking myself incessantly. Because I religiously defend my sleep window and sleep sequence and sleep boundaries, but simultaneously I have to realize, look, the rest of the world doesn't operate on your schedule, buddy, right?
Yeah.
And so how much flexibility is there within those boundaries? And I think, the answer is, of course, like, it's important to be adaptable. It's important to not be so rigid that it negatively impacts other aspects of your life. And so if, for example, as a shade of gray, a sliding scale, if I've not slept well for 4 nights and then it's, hey, I can go out with my friends and sleep like crap a 5th night, I might have a much harder boundary with sleep on that one, right? But if I've been sleeping amazingly well for, let's say, a month, and it's, hey, blah, 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 invitation, go out one night after cranking on sleep to like let's do it. Let's do it. And so that's where a bit of that flexibility comes in. But where the flexibility enters the picture, say at level 1, I think we still circle back to that 0th order question of knowing thyself, what knowing thyself looks like, making observations about the world, seeing how those observations align with predictions you can make about the world, developing a mental model for reality. So you're not just observing it, so you're not just predicting it, but so that you can begin to create and engineer that world as well.
That's amazing. I think that was the third conclusion which I was thinking, which is about there is no absolute truth, and the absolute truth for oneself is about knowing themselves, knowing the environment, and probably just making progress in that direction, in the direction of their dreams, and going towards it, and just knowing that you might have figured out life maybe the better than anyone else has ever figured out. So just keep believing in yourself and your own life and your own truth, because it's a game of probability here.
But great. So I mean, number one, all great. And I would say
Yes.
the one point to nuance there with respect to a game of probability is that think about it from this perspective, if we are living in a probabilistic landscape, and by that I simply mean envision the surface of the earth, for example, it's not flat. And when I say the surface of the earth is not flat, I'm not saying flat earth versus round earth. We can live on a round earth and simultaneously have all the mountains eroded away. And from our small human perspective, if all the mountains eroded away or are eroded away, even on our spherical planet, from our narrow human perspective, the surface of the planet is still pretty damn flat because all the mountains are gone, right? But we know the world doesn't look that way. We know we live on a planet that is mountainous, that has terrain, that has three-dimensionality. That is a probabilistic landscape. There's some probabilities that are higher than others. Those would be the tall mountains. There's some probabilities that are lower than others. Those would be the areas where it's just basically at sea level or even below sea level, right? And every shade of gray in between, every shade of gray in between. And so with that probabilistic landscape, if you can make observations about what that landscape looks like, every night when I take a shower, I know I'm going to feel better. That's a high mountain. There's a high probability that when I take a shower, I'm going to feel better after I take a shower. That's a high mountain. You can leap from mountaintop to mountaintop to mountaintop, from high probability to high probability to high probability. Knowing that collectively among all of us, because we are all human, there are some mountains that are going to be the same mountains for absolutely everybody, because we're all people. Yet simultaneously, there will also be your unique mountains that you share with nobody else, that in that way are kind of special to you, and perhaps in some ways they mean maybe a little bit more. You can still recognize and dial in those other mountains so that you are simultaneously working that generalist and specialist landscape, the probabilities that apply to everybody that help us feel happy, satisfied, find meaning, as well as the subjective probabilities through your personal lived experience, the mountains that are unique to your life that you can always find solace in when the world demands it from you.
So true. So it's like more of you can keep climbing those high mountains by maximizing your probability score, and just knowing that, okay, there are some things which are common across the board across humanity, and there are some things which are unique to your unique mountain highs, which have higher probability of, which brings more contentment to you in a way. Awesome.
And,
so I think
it's just what you want to maximize versus what you want to avoid. If you want to avoid, if you want to go down into a canyon, look, I don't want to run the risk of developing cancer or inflammation systemically or any one of the variety of issues that can result from whether it's chronic sleep loss or many of the diseases of Western civilization. I want a low probability for all that stuff. So I'm going to behave in a way that's going to move me into a canyon for all those things. But simultaneously, if I want to be happy, satisfied, have social connection, and so on, I'm going to run to the top of one of those other mountains. It's going to get me a high probability of achieving those other things that I want to cultivate in my life. So it's developing a mental model that gives you a lay of the land. So you can go into the low probability space when you want to and need to be there, or run into the high probability space when you want to or need to be there.
Wow, I think that's amazing. So I think all these three conclusions can help human, I think, really make progress in their life, I guess. Is there anything else that you want to share where people can, where you feel like we might not have touched on the topics? I know we can touch on a lot of topics and we got to touch only on a few ones. Is there anything else you want to add here?
Yeah, thanks, Atal. So I think for now, the very last thing is this duality between being emotional versus rational. And I think it's just important to remind people, don't be afraid of your emotions. And don't try and be 100% pure rational all the time, because we know, even neurophysiologically, that even when you're being very rational at the underlying physiological level, we are all still pretty much emotional animals moving through reality.
True.
So emotions versus rationality. When you envision your dreams, your life, your future, you're probably going to start off in a very emotional place. But what you can then do is pair those emotions with a series of very rational steps that you can follow in order to achieve those emotional dreams. So just the point is, don't fall victim to that dichotomy of you have to be emotional, you have to be rational. Just like mind and body, emotions and rationality are inseparable. They go together one and one. Leverage both together, because together they will get you farther than they are independent.
Wow, I cannot believe how well you positioned this answer, because I think in the next, what I want to do is go through three questions to you. And this is very much linked to my first question.
Yeah.
And my first question is, decision making is an art, and decision making can sometimes happen in a very fast way. And I think for a lot of people, making decisions is very hard. So my question is, sometimes people say make decisions out of gut, some say decisions out of heart, some say mind. So how, in a very short way, describe myself, what is the best way to make decisions?
That's honestly, that's a simple question with, I think, probably the hardest answer of anything we've discussed thus far. It really is. It really is. If we have mastered the art of decision making, then we can basically do whatever the hell we want, right? Because if every decision is the best decision, you're good. You've now solved this thing called life, right? So just in short, number one, it's an incredibly complex answer to a very simple question. And then number two, the reason why it's complex is that the answer, what is the best decision and how you go about doing it, I think legitimately depends upon context. And briefly on that, I simply mean about 80% of your nervous system is not in your brain, it's in your gut. And literally a gut meaning your GI tract. And so when you hear or talk about a gut feeling, that is not just woo. That is literally physiologically, neurophysiologically, something that exists. And we've all experienced that proverbial and so-called gut feeling, like, sinking in our stomach, something like something just feels wrong about this situation, that whole thing, right? In those moments, if you probably, like, when you reflect on those moments, they are most probably social situations. Some dude walks into the 7-Eleven and you're there, there's some weird look on his face, the way he's dressed, something, whatever it is, like whatever that stereotypical example may be, the sinking in your stomach, the gut feeling, I got to get the F out of here, this doesn't feel safe. We are social animals. We have evolved in a deep, deep history of social situations and social contexts, and the ability, it's not always perfect, but at least some ability to dial into social situations, to feel into social situations, and to make snap judgments in those situations, aka decisions in those situations, to fight, flight, stay, whatever we might do. And so if the situation is more of a social one, even a professionally social one, such as you're at a board meeting, someone comes into the room, they're, trying to pitch you or whatever it may be on, anything. You probably have some gut feeling in some social situation based on your experience with it. In those moments, given the evolutionary context, I might be far more predisposed to take seriously that gut feeling. Then I would be predisposed to take seriously my emotions when I'm trying to consider quantum mechanics or the nature of a complex climate system or something in the natural sciences, for example, meaning the world is unbelievably counterintuitive. Most water on this planet is not in the ocean, it is in rocks. It's something called a hydrate. Clouds are not water vapor, they are liquid water. We could go on and on and on and on. And a minimum liquid water, if it's extra cold, they might be solid water called ice, hence why it snows or hails or something like that. But you cannot see water vapor. Water vapor is invisible. So when you're looking at a cloud, you're not looking at the invisible, you're looking at something, AKA cloud is not water vapor. There are countless examples of the counterintuitive in this world. And so knowing that the world is often massively counterintuitive, why would I want to think that, oh, just because it makes sense, that's got to be the way it is, just because it's intuitive, that's the way it is? Why would I go with my gut feeling, some intuitive thing with the natural world, if we know that the natural world is often and spectacularly counterintuitive? I'm much less likely to go with any sort of emotional gut-related anything with respect to the natural world, knowing that the natural world is massively counterintuitive relative to more likely to take my gut feelings seriously.
True.
In a social context, a context in which the mind-gut axis has evolved. So that's my answer on that one.
Wow, I cannot believe. I think one of the reasons why Brian and I are together on this conversation is because I just follow my gut here, so a social animal.
Hey,
And,
look, I am as well. I'm doing the exact same thing. We're both following our guts on this, and it's effing amazing, right? But there will also be natural aspects of what we engage with. I know as we move forward together, right, hand in hand, there will be natural aspects of this that kind of catch us out of left field. It's like, what the F do we make of this, right? And it's perhaps it's less social. It's more analytical, something like that. Is it wise to take our gut feelings as seriously in those situations? Those will be, back to where we started, those will be the most difficult situations we will find ourselves in when we try and make decisions in contact.
Wow, that's amazing.
Hence why that's not an easy answer.
No, there is no easy answer here. So I think my other question is, when I talked about decision making, there is fast decision making and there is this whole world of procrastination. And in my opinion, I'm also a procrastinator like everyone else over different things. So how to beat procrastination in your kind of thinking?
It's such a good question. I'm trying to think if I've ever struggled with procrastination in high school. I would say early stages in high school, I struggled with procrastination, but that's because in retrospect, I didn't see value in what I was doing. I didn't have the big picture. And because I didn't have the big picture, I couldn't see the smaller picture. I couldn't see or know or understand the value of those smaller steps that would get me to where I wanted to be. Once my mind was blown in context, as mentioned, this first instructor that just blew my mind and inspired and seeded in me this dream to go out and achieve great things and learn the best I can and share that with everybody else. I didn't have the big picture until that point, and it's not like it came wham, hit me at that moment. It was still, and currently still is today, something that's building. But as that big picture had built, I began to see value in the smaller pieces, because I could see how those smaller pieces align with that larger goal, that larger dream. And so in any case, once my mind was blown and I had instilled in me that fire in my belly that has yet to extinguish itself to this day, I don't struggle with procrastination anymore, because I see the value of the smaller pieces as they align with the big picture. But historically, because I did struggle with procrastination, I see, at least in my life, and this could be unique to me, to be honest, I've never even had this conversation before. So this is all just pure stream of consciousness.
Yes.
in my life, all I can pull from is my experience and share with you what I've experienced. And perhaps, you know what, chances are this might resonate with other people because they've experienced the same thing too. As I've gone from as someone who used to procrastinate to someone who does not procrastinate, the secret sauce is seeing value in the smaller pieces because I also see the big picture. And when I see value in the smaller pieces, I can get fired up and curious about and wanting to take action steps on those smaller pieces because I also care about and see value in the big picture too.
Wow, that's amazing. I think I'm just thinking about my examples and my journey here. And for the longest time, last year, if I remember, I was like running and swimming and biking here and there. And I was like, just wanted to kind of like maybe do that Ironman 70.3 last year. I just wanted to do that race. So it was a very goal-oriented mindset for me. And it's just after I was done with it, it came to my mind that, dude, now race is over. What's next? And I was like, I'm struggling again. That's when I started thinking a bigger picture that no, I was doing all of it to actually live a healthy life. And that's why this entire year, I didn't sign up for any races. When everyone was asking me, okay, which race are you practicing so much for? Doing like these 100-mile bike rides and doing like 3,000 miles. I was like, no, I have no goals because I don't want to think of it in terms of goals. I want to think of it as a healthy process, looking at the big picture of my human health in a long run. And that's probably why I was able to run this Ironman race in 10 days because I was just focused on too big of a picture for myself. But I think that just touches on the same thing that I found a lot of purpose looking at the big picture, long run, why I'm doing it. And also here I'm thinking about this podcast as this happens to be the first podcast here, and I don't know where this is going to go if you think about it. I'm just like, okay, curiosity to share your perspective and my perspective with the world and starting this as one of the new things. And in a big picture, it's about helping humanity. I'm like, okay, if we can share our experiences so openly with our open hearts, it's going to help someone out there. Because yes, I do think we are all same in a lot of ways. So yes, I think your perspective about looking at the big picture makes a lot of sense.
I think it's everything, honestly, because I think so often people as we hear the classic cliche of missing the forest because you're stuck in the trees, right? I think so often people don't have that larger forest concept because they're stuck in the weeds and they're so tripped up and stumbling through the weeds that they end up feeling like, like, what's the use? What's the use of doing this just one more time? Because they don't have that big picture. But if they can take a step back to try and see the world objectively, however subjective that may seem, at least try. And if you can see at least not just a big picture as it objectively exists, but also a subjective and purposeful and meaningful big picture for you, then you can begin to see a bit of light coming through those weeds and see that, you know what, if I can see a little bit of light coming through those weeds, then I no longer feel inclined to procrastinate, reaching up and grabbing my hand on the next ledge of that next weed that was blocking my head and my face just a moment ago, because I can see the light there, peeking however small through them. And I can begin to take small steps as I inch my way up and through and out and over and beyond. And before you know it, you're doing Ironman, I'm running mountains, whatever we may be doing, we're fired up because we're now out of the weeds. We can see the big picture. And the beauty of the big picture is that it's not static either. That's something that changes because there are even degrees of bigness in big pictures, right? Because we're always chipping away and understanding how the world works and our place within it. So it's all a journey. And look, it's a pleasure to be on this journey together. And not just together, but even sharing it with other people, because as we discussed moments ago, there's probably no greater gift, especially leading into happiness and satisfaction beyond gratitude, than in helping others, which is one of the valuable pieces that brings me here to engage with you as well as everyone else today.
Wow, that's amazing. So, Brian, I have two more questions for you. One is, what's your next dream?
I actually, so good. So I stumbled upon this is coincidentally and temporally serendipitous. So my next dream, as in second dream, the first I mentioned, following the suicide of this early professor, mentor, and friend at the outset of launching into university and beyond. That was the first dream, was to go out and try and get the best education I can so that I can use it to uplift and transform the lives in just the way mine was transformed. The second dream struck me maybe 3 weeks ago. I was in my bathroom and just going through my morning routine, and it was back to emotion versus rationality. This is an interesting one, right? This led very emotionally with this burning sensation that I want to say, back to this, oddly, started in my gut, in my gut, moved to my chest, my heart, and stayed in my heart, lingered in my heart for like minutes upon minutes. And it's like, I mean, it was like, it wasn't like I had to throw up, but it was like that, like we've all been there, where it's like something's coming and it's going to come out whether I like it or not, but it's coming, right? This was one of those. And it started in my gut, moved to my chest, and lingered there. It's just like some emotional, intellectual, psychological thing was just like leaning into me. And I couldn't help but feel inspired to lean into it. Like, what's there? How can I unpack you and unwrap the pieces to see what's behind that shell? And the answer that came out, and this was like the vomit, for lack of a better phrase. What came to me was, nobody is stepping forward to lead humanity successfully into the 22nd century. There are so many wonderful people who are doing so many great things, whether it's, Elon with solar and electric and all the wonderful, and Neuralink and all the fascinating and wonderful projects that he and his team are up to, on through, whether it's, say, Schmidt Futures, Eric Schmidt's kind of an investment group trying to fund all sorts of great research, right? Like, there's so many wonderful people doing so many cool things. Aubrey de Grey and longevity, and helping to treat aging as a disease so we can achieve longevity, escape velocity. We can unpack that more later. Again, just so many wonderful people doing so many wonderful things. But these wonderful pursuits are in some ways siloed into separate compartments. They're not unified in a way where they really need to be unified across all segments of society. And that second dream, this is what came out of me, is I want to be someone who works to lead humanity, to weave these pieces together, to lead humanity successfully into the 22nd century. And I know, of course, like, I'm not going to be able to do this alone. These pursuits never play out that way. It's going to require a team and a great complement of wonderful, wonderful people. But the second dream is simply that. I want to lead humanity successfully into the 22nd century, because we need this to happen. The world's in a lot of pain in many ways, from humanitarian or for humanitarian reasons, mental and physical health reasons, environmentally, and so on. And we need to step forward and unify as a civilization. And I want to help bring that together. So that's the second dream.
Wow, that's amazing. And as you know, Brian, I have already joined you in this mission, and it's our mission now together.
Yeah,
so I'm very, very grateful to be partnering with you on this, and look at it from a human perspective and focusing on different health aspects as I have gone through my journey. And I think both of us have shared our lives so openly about our hardships that I hope that is a step forward in being real and open about life, and hoping that this is going to help a lot of other people in their journeys as unique beings on this planet. Uh, I think my third question is about if there is something you have to share about what is one thing can make the world better from your perspective?
This is a good question.
Mhm.
And I think the answer is the following. Look, if there's one thing, is to acknowledge where we are in the arc of history. We have to not bullshit ourselves. We have to realize that humanity, Homo sapiens, our branch on the human tree of life, has been around for slightly over 300,000 years. That's our branch on the human tree of life. And we've come a long way for what seems like a long time, but it's really a blip in the general arc of history. This planet has been around for about 4.56 billion years. The universe itself is about 13.8 billion years old. Humanity has been around for about 300,000 years. Meaning if you take even just Earth history, if you take Earth history and extend that out to the length of a human arm, and then take a nail file, and with that nail file, just shed off the last little sliver of keratin at the tip of your middle finger, you will have erased the entirety of humanity from its existence on this planet. Like, that's how much of an afterthought we are. Wow. But despite that, and despite perhaps how humbling that is, from our perspective as humans, for whom days, weeks, months, and years is the nature of our timeline, 300,000 years does feel like a long time, right? True. And so if we can acknowledge our situation, that we are basically an afterthought of history, to put it bluntly, but simultaneously realize that we have been around for 300,000 years. And over the arc of those 300,000 years, we've changed quite a lot. And we've used culture as this wonderful tool to transform civilization. We have dug fossil fuels out of the ground. We have transformed the climate. We have dug other resources out of the ground. We have transformed civilization. We now construct these proverbial concrete jungles. We have created, we have engineered, back to that, we've engineered this huge environment for ourselves, where now we are often at this great state of mismatch. That is a mismatch, a misalignment between the cultural environment we've created for ourselves versus the biological states that we need for ourselves in order to thrive. Being up early, greeting the sun, living in that moment, as we were discussing at the outset of the conversation. We have created a huge cultural mismatch in civilization. Mismatch between culture and biology to the point where it's causing not just physical health problems, but mental health problems. Not just health problems for civilization, but also environmental problems and to contextualize the larger global ecosystem that humanity lives within, which is also further poisoning us with respect to climate issues, air pollution issues, toxics in the environment issues, etc. Like, the list goes on and on and on. If we cannot effing bullshit ourselves, but recognize where we are, back to big picture, if we can recognize where we are as a global civilization, that is step one. I think that's the best decision that we can make first. And if we cannot bullshit ourselves and recognize where we are, then we can begin to get fired up about seeing how we can move rapidly together as a collective and global team to overcome where we are and the challenges that we are in, to make it through and out on the other side, to the point where we are quite literally, no bullshit, without exaggeration, living in the 22nd century. where maybe now you and I, say Brian and Atal, have been around the sun 100 plus times, but biologically, we are still in our 30s or equivalent as animals because we have been able to reverse biological age at a rate that is faster than chronological age has proceeded. If we cannot bullshit ourselves and recognize where we are, step one, the greatest decision I think we can make, then I hope that that can help catalyze the subsequent actions that are being taken by many great people around this planet to further facilitate our launch, our progress, our success, and our landing in that 22nd century. So that's my answer.
Wow.
And again, it's just total stream of consciousness. I've never been asked that question, but I think just objectively,
yeah,
I think that's what it's got to be.
That's amazing. And I think, Brian, you nailed it down about what we need to do is just acknowledging and looking at the big picture here and understanding our position and our role. And just that acknowledgement can bring a lot of peace and also help us move forward in better ways to take humanity forward to 22nd century. And yes, health, I think, is very much of my passion and your passion too. So that's also amazing to hear. So thank you so much, Brian. And to all our viewers, I want to thank you all for listening. And I hope you enjoyed this conversation. This is one of my best conversation. I'm talking to a genius here who really thinks at the pace which I can't even think about. And I'm just so appreciative of that fact. And we look forward to partnering with you all on where you align with our vision and our mission, and see what beauty we can create together in this universe. And also look forward to your feedback on how we can make these conversation. If you have any suggestion on any specific topic you want us to cover on, we would love to hear back from you. And yeah, super grateful. Have a beautiful day in paradise. It's a paradise. Yes.
If I may, sorry, just briefly say,
yes.
I have to compliment you at all. And again, I make zero effort to wear you down with flattery. I just need to be honest and say, number one, I appreciate everything that you just shared about me and your perceptions of me and how I influence you and your life and your state of being. I cannot help but feel inspired to only reciprocate the following thoughts. And those are simply to say that you brighten my life and enliven my mind in a way that I have not once ever experienced with another human being in the way, in the detail, and character that I experience with you. It is precious beyond words. It is unique, one of a kind, in the true sense of that word. And I can only hope that we continue to bring this out, to nurture and blossom what we've already begun to cultivate and share it with everyone as we move forward together. So just thanking you.
Thank you, my friend. I am super grateful and I have very similar feelings. And this is our first thing. And I am just like, wow, these conversations are just so awesome and just blows my mind into thinking about things from a very different perspective than I've ever thought about, and just super grateful. So thank you, viewers. Have a beautiful day in paradise. It's a paradise because this is not forever as a human. So we should make the best out of our day today and really, truly live it at its best potential. Thank you and I hope you enjoy our conversation and look forward to your feedback. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.